So winter is heading our way thick and fast in the UK, and today we are going to cover a few ideas of how to make sure that your liquid malt beer kit from Pinter or elsewhere is mixed properly for fermentation, and how to maintain temperatures for your fermentation throughout the duration to make sure that you get a successful result. If you are heating your water in a saucepan and mixing your liquid malt this way, this will give you the most professional finish. It will dissolve the liquid malt much better than any other mixing method, and it will give you a uniform mix, distributed sugars throughout the wort, and it will give you more accurate gravity readings and a better fermentation. If you are using this method, then of course it doesn't matter if you're using cold water out the tap or bottled water, because when you go ahead and heat up your water in the saucepan, you'll get it to a sufficiently high temperature anyway before you mix in the liquid malt. To get the liquid malt running clear from the packet, then just put it in a saucepan of hot water, leave it for perhaps 10 minutes before you cut it and transfer it into the saucepan. Now we'll move on to the other methods of shaking the pinter and stirring in a jug and pre-mixing it, which will take a slightly different approach. If you're using bottled water, then it makes sense to keep the bottled water in the warmest room in your house before mixing your liquid malt. And as just detailed, put your liquid malt into a saucepan of hot water for 10 minutes before you transfer either directly into the pinter or into a mixing jug, depending on how you like to mix the liquid malt and your water. If you are using tap water, which is going to be cold straight out the tap, then you need to go about warming this up to 22 degrees C, I would say, before mixing the liquid malt. So in this instance, I would say don't use your hot tap water to top up the cold and to increase the temperature, because your hot water can basically leach metals when it's through the pipework of the system or from your boiling system. And also your hot water is not considered sterile because the tank that stores the hot water is not sterile either. Therefore, the most sensible way to heat up your cold tap water is to boil some in your kettle and just top it up till you get the right temperature. You will probably benefit from buying yourself a thermometer to test this. And I would say in the cold weather, if you top it up to about 22 degrees C, so that you've got that temperature of the water into your pinter, and then you can warm up the liquid malt in a saucepan of hot water for 10 minutes, transfer and mix it in the usual method that you prefer. Some people still like to just close up the pinter and shake it for mixing. That is probably the least effective way that you can get a wort mixed properly. Then the second choice to that would be to pre-mix. This is a 3-litre jug. Pre-mix some in here, stir it all in, and then transfer it to the pinter, top it up and shake it for the final mix then. Some people, I do know, like to put the spoon in the pinter and actually try and stir it up and mix it inside the pinter instead of using a jug. The negative sides of that is the protrusions in the bottom of this fermentation vessel for the 2 valves and for the actual hopping port stick up. So when you pour your fresh press in here and your liquid malt is running straight down to the bottom, then it runs in between these valves and it's very difficult to get this out. You're trying to stir it then to agitate it out because you can't get to the bottom of the actual fermentation vessel. The other negative thing about putting a spoon directly into your pinter is that if you create any scratches on the surface of the plastic, then that is like a magnet for bacteria. So long term, you're probably creating a higher risk for bacterial infection moving forward. So personally, I don't recommend stirring your actual liquid malt in the pinter. If you like to pre-mix that way or use a spoon, I always prefer to do it in a jug. So now we have mixing the liquid malt covered, we need to move on to how we're going to sustain sufficient temperature for fermentation inside your pinter when you've got such a cold ambient temperature. So what I use for this myself is a thermostatically controlled heat mat, which is a really simple way to maintain the temperature inside your pinter during fermentation. I bought this some time back and it is worth its weight in gold. You know, it's been incredibly useful to me and I use it all the time. I will drop a link in the description and I will probably copy that link into the comments as well. So if you want to go ahead and buy yourself one of these, it's worked out superb for me whenever I've needed it. And of course, throughout this winter, I will be constantly using this now to maintain the temperatures of all my fermentation in my pinter. You can see here that I like to use a little bit of wooden board underneath it. That's because I tend to set mine in the other room and I'll put it on top of a carpet. So I don't like to put the heat mat directly on the carpet. So I just cut out a little square of plywood, but of course you could fashion that in whatever style or whatever way suits you best. So this thermostatically controlled unit comes up with a probe so it can actually monitor the temperature. And this is the important thing about it. And this is why I paid a little bit extra for this type of device. When it reaches the target temperature of 22 degrees C, then of course it will turn itself off. So it doesn't just keep running 24/7. So during the day, if the temperatures peak and pick up, the actual thermostat will turn the heat mat off when it's not required. During the night, when temperatures plunge, the thermostat will pick it up through the probe and kick in and switch the heat mat on and maintain a steady temperature throughout the night. So it's perfect for the job in hand. I'll give you a little close up and let you see this device and how it actually operates with the pinter. I will talk through. I'll go ahead and show you how I set this up with my pinter. I just pop the pinter onto the heat mat. I find personally the best place for the probe is to wedge it in between the dock and the pinter itself. So the way that I go about this is to tilt the pinter back, rock it back on its axis, just in line with where this pinter logo is. I pop this actual probe in. I slip it round the back like that, where it's now loose, and then release the pinter. So what you've actually done is wedged it in between the gap of the actual rim of the dock and the pinter casing itself. So once the probe is in place here, it won't fall out and it's in a good position there to accurately monitor the temperature. Then these are incredibly simple to operate, these heating instructions. You just power on, and then you've got the up and down arrow. And for example, if I wanted to set this to 22 degrees C, I would set it to 22, and then that's it. That is on 22 degrees C now. That reading there, 25.9, is reading the current ambient room temperature, and that will slowly adjust. You can see it slowly going down now. It will sort of like calibrate to the room, and in the end it will reach an equilibrium. And of course this setting can easily be adjusted as and when you see fit, but once you've set it to 20, 22, whatever your preference is, then you'll find that it does the job for you. This room temperature in here, I would say, is not as high as 25.5. You can see there that it's slowly coming down. The room temperature at the moment is probably more like, 22 degrees. It'll probably settle somewhere like 22, 21 degrees C. To give you a better view of where this probe is actually situated, I'm going to remove this pinter so that you can see where it was on the dock. And you can see what we're looking for here, of course. You can see that there's a ridge around the edge here. And what we're looking for is to just tilt the pinter back, slip the probe behind here, and then rest the pinter forward again. And that's where this probe now sits and monitors the temperature, just tucked behind there. So that's what you're looking for when the pinter's connected, coming in from here, just nipping it behind there, and then relaxing the pinter, which will sit back forward again and keep that tucked in between this and the actual case itself. So there you have it. That is how I set my pinter up for the winter, and it serves me incredibly well using just a simple heat mat like any other home brewer would. I do find as well that this is fantastic for using when you use specialist yeasts. Perhaps if you use a Kvike yeast and you want to drive the temperature up to 30, 35 degrees C even, then of course I pop my Pinter on the mat, ramp it up to 30 degrees C and get the yeast, you know, we call it, obviously I call it pitbull yeast now, just for fun. And that's the high temperature that's required. The heat mat can totally take care of that. You know, so it's a very simple and fantastic way to go about maintaining your temperatures throughout the winter and ensuring your successful fermentation through and through. So there you have it. That is it for this video. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will catch you on the next one. Cheers.